Welcome, and thank you for joining me again today. This is the account with the news summary for day 370 of the war in Ukraine. Today I have one article I want to point out, and I also have two extra news segments. The first is about the alleged drone attacks inside Russia, and the second is about the REDAN PMC youth group. The rest of the updates are grouped into the usual situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments. But before we start the report, the flashpoints along the front. Bakhmut. Bakhmut continues to be the main focus of the Russian assaults. Especially in the north, the situation remains critical, with Russia slowly advancing, trying to fully encircle the city. South of Bakhmut, the situation remains stable for now. Ukraine has announced today that additional units are being sent to Bakhmut in order to reinforce and stabilize the situation. Of course, there are assaults happening in other directions on the front line as well. However, nothing significantly has changed in those areas. And now the article by the Ukrainska Pravda I wanted to point out, titled Two Plans of the Kremlin. Who should have ruled Ukraine if Kiev had fallen? The original article is in Ukrainian, but the Ukrainska Pravda published the main part of it in English as well. Pro-Russian businessman Viktor Medvedchuk versus the fugitive president Viktor Yanukovych. Who would rule Ukraine in case of Russia's success? It seems Russia had no specific plan. Just that Kiev must fall in 3 days and the rest of Ukraine in 10 days. The article, while long, gives an interesting insight into the political play behind the scenes. If you're interested, please give it a read. To start the news segment, a look at the alleged drone attack inside Russia. In several Russian regions, an air alert was announced on various radio stations and TV channels. The Ministry of Emergency Situations of the Russian Federation announced that the servers had been hacked. However, shortly after, explosions were reported in Russia's southern city of Tuapse. The city of Tuapse lies 680 kilometers southeast of the closest Ukrainian-controlled territory on the Black Sea coast in Russia's southern Krasnodar region. Russian media published photos of the aftermath of the explosion and subsequent fire at the Rosneft oil depot in Tuapse. A source in the law enforcement agencies confirmed to 93.ru that the oil depot was attacked by drones. Russian media also reported that near Moscow a drone crashed in the Kolomensky district of the Moscow suburbs near a facility owned by Gazprom. Additionally, in St. Petersburg, about 200 square kilometers of the airspace were closed and the local Pulkovo airport shut down after an unidentified flying object was spotted. Later, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that the airspace over St. Petersburg has been closed because they are conducting air defense training. Belgorod Mayor Valentin Demidov reported that authorities have found 3 drone wreckages in Belgorod, Russia. No further information was provided. However, Murat Kumpilov, head of the Republic of Adygea, reported that an unidentified flying object crashed in the region and shared photos of the wreckage. And now for the updates on the REDAN PMC youth movement. Supporters of the Russian movement REDAN group were detained in Ukraine. Here is what is known about it. This rather long article has a lot of information on the issue. The head of the investigative department of the National Police in Kharkiv Oblast, Serhiy Bolvinov, stated today that his department has prevented mass riots among supporters of the newly formed REDAN Youth PMC in Ukraine. The police is searching the homes of organizers of the events and the group itself. The National Police has blocked access to 18 online channels and groups connected to this violent subculture targeting Ukrainian youth. According to the report, the movement originated in Russia and promotes violent confrontations between teenagers. Police prevented at least 30 events across Ukraine, and around 700 people, most of them teenagers, were brought to local police stations for questioning. The police indicated that the movement is an attempt by Russian propagandists to conduct yet another informational and psychological operation and involve teenagers in illegal activities. The National Police of Ukraine also reported that they have arrested the 16 and 13-year-old founders of the REDAN PMC youth movement's Telegram channels. A look at all the minor news updates out of Ukraine. Every third Ukrainian refugee feels they are part of a community in their host country, but the same number would like to return home. The EU Agency for Fundamental Rights, FRA, published this new survey on Tuesday. According to the chief of the Security Service of Ukraine, Major General Vasil Malyuk, Russian hackers carry out an average of more than 10 cyber attacks on Ukraine every day. During the recording, air raid sirens started sounding throughout Ukraine. There are reports of incoming Shahed drones, and videos were shared online featuring the specific sound generated by their engines. Considering Russia currently has a significant number of missile carriers stationed in the Black Sea, this could be a prelude to another missile attack. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. Serhiy Khlan, member of the Kherson Regional Council, reported that the Russian military and its collaborators are setting up an administration on the Arabat Spit. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. 2 military transport planes from the Long-Range Radar Tracking Aircraft Service Center have arrived at the Machulishchi Air Base in Belarus. This is a good indication that an A-50 aircraft was indeed damaged as reported the other day. Dmitry Peskov, press secretary of the Russian president, has stated that Vladimir Putin remains open to negotiations about Ukraine, but neither German Chancellor Olaf Scholz nor French President Emmanuel Macron, with whom the Kremlin wants to be in touch, are contacting Russia at the moment at all. Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, claimed at the Federal Security Service of Russia Collegium that units of the FSB directly participated in the war against Ukraine and suffered losses. Alexander Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, arrived in China to meet Xi Jinping, president of China. Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a law terminating the validity of treaties concluded within the framework of the Council of Europe for the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation has not been a member of this international organization since March 2022. Among the treaties are the Statute of the Council of Europe, the Convention on the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, the European Convention on the Prevention of Terrorism, the European Charter of Local Self-Government, and the Social Charter. Putin also signed a law suspending Moscow's participation in the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty with the United States, which remains the last agreement limiting the strategic nuclear arsenals of both states. Explosions and a fire were reported near the airfield in Yeysk, Russia. Local authorities claim it is a training exercise, but local residents shared videos in which either ambulance or police sirens can be heard. Russia currently has 17 warships on combat duty in the Black Sea. 5 of them are missile carriers, including 2 submarines. The total salvo of cruise missiles is 32. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. The Canadian military has published a video showing how they trained Ukrainian soldiers to operate the Leopard 2 tanks. Lockheed Martin's mobile rocket launcher plant in Camden, Arkansas, is gearing up to boost production of the HIMARS system after its success on the battlefield in Ukraine drove up demand from other nations. Western technology companies continue to export dual-use and specific military components to Russia as late as November 2022, according to a new report released by International Partnership for Human Rights and the Independent Anti-Corruption Commission. The Rheinmetall company, on behalf of the German government, is supplying Ukraine with Surveil Spire automated intelligence systems. The Surveil Spire automated intelligence system is made by Estonia's DefSec Intel and is mainly used to monitor large areas with a minimum number of personnel. The United States does not expect Russia to make significant territorial gains in Ukraine in the near future. The United States is completing a training course for Ukrainian air defense specialists on the Patriot air defense system, which is taking place at Fort Still, Oklahoma. And now for the intelligence report segment, starting with the UK Ministry of Defence. On January 19, 2023, amateur aircraft spotters observed a Russian A-50 mainstay airborne early warning AEW system accompanied by two MiG-31K Foxhound fighters departing from Machulishchi Air Base, Belarus, participating in joint Russian-Belarusian air drills between January 16 and February 1, 2023. On February 26, 2023, Belarusian partisan group BPOL and exiled opposition leaders reported an A-50 mainstay had sustained damage from uncrewed aerial vehicle UAV attacks at Machulishchi Air Base. BPOL reported to explosions and damage to the front and middle section of the A-50 mainstay as well as the radar antenna. The A-50 mainstay is a Russian airborne early warning and control platform. Its role is to build a recognized air picture and to provide coordination to adjoining fighter aircraft. Attribution and damage has not been officially corroborated. However, the loss of an A-50 mainstay would be significant as it is critical to Russian air operations for providing an air battle space picture. This will likely leave 6 operational A-50s in service, further constraining Russian air operations. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. Russian officials are promoting an information operation that falsely frames Russia's war in Ukraine as existential for Russia, the Institute writes. During an interview, Russian President Vladimir Putin said he did not know if such an ethnic group as the Russian people can survive in the form in which it exists today, if the West succeeds in destroying the Russian Federation and establishing control over its fragments. Putin claimed the West already has a plan set out on paper to destroy Russia. According to him, Russia had to suspend its participation in the START Treaty in order to ensure its strategic stability and security in the face of a concerted Western effort to use START to cripple Russia's strategic prospects. The researcher stressed that no prominent Western official has called for the dissolution of the Russian Federation, and Western leaders have been very careful to articulate their aims as being to enable Ukraine to liberate all its territory at most. Further topics assessed were: a reportedly captured Russian military manual suggests that Russian forces are implementing new assault tactics to compensate for current combat power limitations in response to continued offensive failures. The manual suggests that Russian forces are trying to adapt maneuver forces into smaller and more agile military formations than were employed earlier in the war. The tactics of the assault detachment additionally suggest that the Russian military may be attempting to institutionalize practices used to marginal tactical effect by the Wagner Group in Bakhmut. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. The Russian Federation continues to focus its main efforts on offensive action in the Kupiansk, Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and Shahtarsk directions. The enemy continues to violate the norms of international humanitarian law, continues to strike, carry out artillery shelling of civilian objects and houses of the civilian population, and tries to destroy the critical infrastructure of our state. In the Kupiansk and Liman directions, the enemy carried out offensive actions in the areas of Makivka, Nevske, and Bilohorivka settlements of the Luhansk Oblast. The enemy continues to advance in the direction of Bakhmut. The enemy does not stop storming the city of Bakhmut. Our defenders repelled attacks in the areas of Dubovo-Vasilivka, Bodanivka, Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar, and Bilahora settlements of the Donetsk Oblast. The enemy continues to attack the positions of our troops in the Avdiivka and Shahtarsk directions. The enemy carried out unsuccessful offensive actions in the direction of the settlements of Kamyanka, Pervomaiske, Nevelske, Marinka, and Pobjeda of the Donetsk Oblast. In the Zaporizhia and Kherson directions, the enemy is defending, and in some areas it is trying to create conditions for the transition to the offensive. In Enerhodar, Zaporizhia Oblast, the Russian occupiers continue to put pressure on the civilian population, in particular by restricting the supply of heat and hot water to homes. After mass layoffs, there is a shortage of specialists at the nuclear power plant, due to which the invaders are forced to hire people without education and experience. Recently, the Russian occupiers have become more active in looting in the temporarily occupied territory of the Kherson Oblast, in particular in the city of Oleshki. Vehicles are a special object of the invaders' attention. And that wraps up the report. If you're interested in any of the articles I mentioned and want to read up on the details, I included the links to them in the description. If you enjoyed the report and found it informative, please consider sharing it with others and giving me a like. I hope you will join me again tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You are listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.